Hello, everyone, and welcome back to People Jew Want to Know podcast. This episode is coming out on Yom HaShoah, or Holocaust Remembrance Day, and of course, on a day like today, my guest is a Holocaust survivor, Miriam Griver. Miriam is the relative of my good friend Noah, so that's how I got connected to Miriam. Noah and I are longtime college friends, and Noah and Miriam both currently live in Israel. We all know that the number of living Holocaust survivors is very, very small. So I feel super privileged to bring on Miriam to tell us just a small part of her incredible story. Now, considering she's living in Israel, I am so saddened to think that Miriam had to survive both the Holocaust and October 7th. Miriam was born in Budapest, Hungary, and made Aliyah with her family in 1949. She had a career as a school teacher and principal, and after that, she began an incredibly impressive career of both volunteering and philanthropic work. She served as the National Chair of Health at Hadassah and the President of Hadassah Israel, which she will tell us more about in the episode. Her focus was always helping disadvantaged populations in Israel. I cannot underscore enough just how much Miriam has done that has improved the lives of Holocaust survivors specifically. Since 2007, she has devoted an incredible amount of time and energy to this. She has served as a member on numerous various committees: the Board of Directors of the Center of Holocaust Survivor Organizations, the Forum of Holocaust Survivor Organizations in the Jerusalem municipality, and she's been a member of the Executive Committee of the Israeli Parliamentary Association for Holocaust Remembrance Activities and Assistance to Survivors in the Knesset. Wow, these committees have long names. Anyway, she's been a board member of the World Federation of Child Holocaust Survivors as a child survivor herself, and has given countless lectures to younger generations on the subject of the Holocaust. In 2012, Miriam was even awarded the Distinguished Citizen of Jerusalem Award. I think there isn't a board out there that Miriam has not sat on. Her contributions to the survivor community are tremendous. On a personal note, I'll mention that Miriam is also married to Moshe, who I actually got to meet on the call, and they have 3 sons and 6 beautiful grandchildren. In this episode, Miriam reflects on her career and, of course, what happened to her family in the Holocaust. I want you to really hear the rawness with which Miriam shares her story. It's as if it happened yesterday. Miriam gives an incredibly descriptive, immersive account of her experience, even as just a child. She talks about how her childhood was taken away from her and the impact that it had on the rest of her life. Miriam also had a sister who was just a little older than her, so they went through the Holocaust together. They were very close throughout their life, and Miriam's sister passed away 2 years ago. Miriam misses her sorely, and that also shines through the episode. I also talked to Miriam about how she feels in light of what's happening in Israel right now. That, perhaps, was the hardest part to hear for me personally. I am so disgusted by the fact that Holocaust survivors today have to witness the second most horrific event for the Jewish people. I just can't believe that there are people who are witnessing such events twice. How can there be so much pain in one lifetime? And I think despite the difficult, painful nature of this conversation, Miriam's optimism and resilience is so apparent. She talks about the importance of being kind, listening to others, seeing the humanity in others. The spirit of our people cannot be broken, and I hope you take the time to listen to this episode and really internalize this day. We cannot forget, we have to keep talking about this, and I'm proud to bring you this story. Hello, Miriam. Welcome to People Jew Want to Know podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
I appreciate it very much, and thank you for inviting me.
Without further ado, please tell us about yourself. What do you do, and how did you get there?
Okay, I was born in Budapest, in Hungary, during the war, in the beginning of the war. In 1949, we came to Israel on Yom HaShoah, which is the Independence Day of Israel, the first year of Independence Day of Israel. We arrived in Israel, and my father decided we are going to live in Jerusalem because of the wonderful weather compared to Tel Aviv. So we spent our time in Yerushalayim, and I finished grade school, high school, and I went to a teacher's seminar in England. I came back and I taught, and I was a principal. When I finished, I retired early, and still during my years of work, I was a member of Hadassah, Women of Hadassah, when I retired, they decided that they would like to have me as the president of Israel. So I became the Hadassah president of Israel. I was voted.
There is an interesting career journey that you've had throughout your life where you have dedicated your life to the Jewish world, even after
That's correct.
everything that you've endured. And I imagine it's because you found it important to help
Very.
build your community.
Yes. And as a Hadassah president, I established work for children that are from the lower economy, give them special afternoon attention and helping them in their homework. I really started to do breast cancer in Israel. It wasn't popular. Women went to be checked as they became pregnant, but they never checked their breasts because they didn't teach it in the medical schools. As I was president of Hadassah, and we are connected to the Hadassah Hospital and Hadassah School of Medicine, so they have decided to start teaching in Hadassah to check women's breasts. And we went all around the country, from city to city, to collect women and tell them and show them how to check themselves. Nowadays, we don't do that anymore. But in those days, it was something very new and very important to do. We, with other organizations, we came together and we asked the Kupot Cholim, which is where you go when you are sick, and we asked them to help us out and send because they have the name of the woman, they have the address of the woman, and they know when they were born, to send them a note that she has to go and be checked for breast cancer. And that's how breast cancer was introduced into Israel.
Talk to me about what are some of the lessons you've learned in your career, both in the work and Hadassah, but also you were a winner of the Jerusalem Citizen of the Year Award. As you reflect on this, what do you think you've learned?
That's correct. Okay, I got it for two reasons. One, as we were talking about the breast cancer, I befriended the head of the oncology department in Hadassah, and we decided that it's very important to send out young doctors to go and check the women. Actually, we were the only ones. I was the only one with my secretary. We went around the country to the very south and to the very north and to the Bedouin section and to the all kinds of groups of Arab sections. So we did that. We started in Jerusalem and the periphery of Jerusalem. And that's why Yakir Yerushalayim, the Dear of Jerusalem, I got for that I did it in Jerusalem and then in the country. And then for the second part is because I helped out a lot the Holocaust survivors. I was the head of the largest group of Holocaust survivors, and we had over the men and women from all over the world. But we not only did for ourselves, but we did also for everybody in Israel and in outside of Israel. But mainly, we made sure that the Holocaust survivors in Israel are well taken care of. And so we had an organization in the Knesset, in the parliament, and we met once a month in the parliament, and we told them what we need and how we should do that. These are the two reasons that I got the Dear of Jerusalem. The main lesson that I learned is always smile and be very kind, and then people will smile back to you and they'll be very kind and they'll listen to you. Secondly is that I listened, just like I wanted other people to listen to me. I listened to them, and many times they corrected me. Wonderful, fantastic. But I always had help. We always did it with partnership with the city, with the welfare part in the city. Whatever we needed, we always did it with another group so we can really put together our strengths and do a good job. And most of the things that I introduced are still going on.
You know, it's interesting. Whenever I talk to Holocaust survivors, it could be men, it could be women, different ages, different experiences. I always see the same theme. When I ask them what they learned, they always talk about either to be kind or the humanity of others, that they learned that you have to maintain your humanity and be grateful for the kindness that others extend you. It's a recurring theme. I want to ask you to talk a little bit about what happened to you during the Holocaust and your family's story.
Okay. The worst thing that happened to me as a child, that I was never a child. I never remember myself as a child. I was 2.5 years old, and I remember myself as a grown-up, that I'm not allowed to talk, and I have to be very responsible. My youth was torn from me. I never went to kindergarten. I never had a doll to play with. I never had friends. Luckily, I had a sister, an older sister. She was older than me by 14 months. And so, we talked to each other, but I never had any friends. It was terrible for me. But on the other hand, I really learned of giving from my parents. When Czechoslovakia was taken over by the Germans, that was the first European city that was taken over by the Germans, many of the Jewish people from Czechoslovakia came to Budapest because Budapest wanted to keep the Jews in Budapest more or less safe. And he told the Germans, if you don't let me do that, then I won't be able to send you money. And so he kept us more or less safe, although all the rules and the regulations that were in Germany were on us. Our apartment house became a yellow star house, which meant that only Jews lived there. They took out, if there were non-Jews, they took them out and they put Jews in. And it was a Jewish home. And we only could go out like an hour a day to go out and find some food. And really one day when we went out, my sister, my mother, and myself, a priest came to us as we were standing in line. And he said to my mother, after you take your food, come to me. And of course, my mother said to herself, she's with 2 little girls, I cannot run away. She didn't know what he wanted from her. And then after we took some food, we went to him. And he gave my mother, he must have known her because my grandmother had a very famous coffee shop next to the opera. A lot of people knew them. He must have known them or go into there sometime. He said, I leave your name, because she had a very Hungarian name. Her name was Sarah Piroshka. Piroshka is a very famous name in Hungary. And he said, I left your name and I left your birth date, but I changed the city where you were born. And you can use it. And she was a blonde lady. And also we as children were blonde. And she said, you can go out in the street, don't be afraid. And you can show this certificate to whoever, if anybody asks you. So she put it away and we went home. She really never used it because she didn't trust to go out, not times that she wasn't allowed to. And she always went out with her yellow star. And in the meantime, I told you that Czechoslovakia was taken over, and the Hungarian government announced that whoever helps, any Jew that helps the Czechoslovakian Jewish communities that come to Budapest is going to be shot. That's his punishment. He's going to be shot. He's going to be a criminal and he's going to be shot. But my parents couldn't just stand there and do nothing. So they had a few couples, and mainly they had children in our basement. Every once in a while, a man came and took the children and put them somewhere else. Finally, I got to know that those children were on the children transport to England, so they were saved. Of course, the other couples, whenever they found somewhere to hide or to be somewhere, they left the house. But while we were doing it, and for years I couldn't say it, a Jew told the police on my father that he is hiding, not, thank God, my mother, but that he is hiding people in his basement. And of course, the Milash, the brown shirt, came in and took them all out and took my father, and they wanted to shoot him. And my mother, because they came in middle of 1800s to Hungary, they knew the government. And my mother went up to Hoti and asked him, please don't shoot him. So I said, fine, I won't shoot him. But he took him and he put him in the army and the Jews were slaves in the army, and he had to pick out mines. And his profession was a rabbi. So what did he know about mines? To pick out mines from the earth. But this is one way that he could be killed. So that was okay with them. But thank God, nothing happened to him. One day, my mother heard that some men came home for a few days, and she wanted to see her husband, and she wanted us to see him. So she went to the head of the prison over there, of the army, and she knocked on the door. She saw that on the door was written, no Jews and no dogs are allowed, I shoot them. She had the yellow star on, and she knocked on the door, and she came in. So the first thing he said to her, he took out his revolver from his drawer, and the first thing he said to her, I'm going to shoot you because you are a Jew, and didn't you read what it says on my door? No Jews and dogs are allowed, I'll shoot them. So my mother said to him, I'm too short, I didn't look up, so I didn't read it. But she did. And so he said, okay, what's your husband's name? And she told him, and then he could come home for a couple of days. So he came home on a Sunday, and he took us out to the opera house. As we were standing there, and we hear the boots of the Germans. The Germans came into Budapest. Up to now, we had the rules and regulations of Germany. But now, Eichmann and his henchmen came to Budapest, and they settled in the Jewish center above where they built two ghettos. But one ghetto was next to the Dohani, and we lived not far from the Dohani, so we were in that ghetto. And he, from up there, he looked down and he saw what's going on in the ghetto. And so we heard those boots, so my father took us quickly and he ran home. Of course, he had to go back to the army base, and my mother and us, we stayed home by ourselves. And right away, the machines, the trains were so quick to come and go, that when the government told the Germans that we are going to be we want you to be under the Germans, and they said yes, but in one condition, that you give us back all the territory that we lost in World War I. Hungary got back all its territory that they lost in World War I, and they made a census of how many Jews they have in the whole territory of all the Romania that they got back, and all parts of little places that they got back, and they came up to the number of 650,000 Jews were in the larger Hungary. And within 3 to 4 months, they got them all into the ghetto and all on the trains, and they killed 560,000 Jews in 3 to 4 months. That was the tragedy of the Hungarian Jews, that in such a short time, they didn't know what's happening, and they were just killed, mainly in Auschwitz and Birkenau, but also in other places. And about 200,000 or more of them than that were killed by the Milash, by the brown shirts in Hungary. Either they were shot or they were brought to the Danube and thrown into the Danube by tying them one to the other and just killing one. So anybody they saw on the street, the Jewish people couldn't be on the streets anymore. Anyway, they were in ghettos. And we were put from our house, all our house were in the ghetto of next to the Dohani. But many more people, many more Jews came in there. It was packed, it was full, it was, you couldn't go out, you couldn't go on the streets in those places. And which was amazing, they never took out the garbage. And so even in every day they took out, started with older people and younger people with their families, and they took them on the train. And the train station isn't far from the Dohani, and they didn't have to go very far. And the trains came and came and came and came and just left. People in the ghetto were also looking to hide in the ghetto because it was a closed ghetto and you couldn't go in or out without somebody knowing you that you are going in or out, because there weren't many gates. There was one main gate that you could go in and out. And so we also hid in the ghetto. We found a very cold place with a lot of other people, and we even couldn't sleep at night. We just sat there. We couldn't hardly stand. We just sat there. I was sitting on my mother's lap. My sister was sitting on my grandmother's lap. My grandfather, in the meantime, passed away. He asked my sister to go and bring him some tea. Of course, there was no tea, but there was hot water. And until she went to me, told my grandmother that he wants some tea. And by the time she came back, I was sitting with him, and he put his head down and he passed away. Can you imagine a 3.5-year-old girl seeing her grandfather die? The sweet little thing that he was. And he either studied the Gemara all day or he painted. He loved to paint. He painted big, beautiful pictures that I have no idea where they went. I have one little picture that he mainly painted on silk. Beautiful, beautiful forests and flowers and beautiful paintings. He passed away in front of us. We buried him, of course, in the Dohani, in the grounds of the Dohani, and then they took him after the war and they buried him in the Jewish cemetery. And for a while, everything was fine, but one day we hear screaming and yelling and knocking with the guns, and they told us, get out, get out, get out, and with your hands up. And my sister didn't put her hands up. You might think how old she was, 4.5, 5 years old. She didn't, and one of the guys put his gun next to her. So she got very scared. So my grandmother told her, he's a very nice man. Put your hands up and he won't do anything to you. And that's what happened. That's how she was saved. My legs froze in that cold cellar that we were in, and my mother had to pick me up because I couldn't walk, and she thought I'll never walk again. She came up and she was marked, and they told her, tomorrow you take a little suitcase and stand by the door and you are going on the train. So that evening, she couldn't fall asleep. She didn't know what to do. She was in a dilemma. She said, if I take my 2 children, I'm sure we are all going to die, because she knew that her husband went already, one of the first ones on the train, and he never wrote a letter. So something wrong is happening. Something bad is happening. And she said, if we all go together, I can't do anything but to leave them open. They'll take them the next day to the train. So she thought, and in the middle of the night, she took us, she dressed us, she took 2 pillows, and we went to the garbage. She took out garbage, and she made a hole in the garbage, and she put us inside the garbage with a pillow in front of us. And she told us, don't cry, don't talk, don't do anything, and don't come out from there until I come back and I get you. Of course, we cried and we held hands and we fell asleep. And when we came to Israel, my mother sat us down and she said, the life we had, I'd never want to mention. We never had them. It wasn't there. And we start our history from this moment that we are in Jerusalem. She told it to my father. He never talked about the Auschwitz. She told it to us. We never talked about it. We never told our friends in school about it. That's how we lived. So I have a real hole that I don't know how long we were there and how did she come back. What did she do? Nothing. But I remember her telling my grandmother that when she was very near the train, she just threw down her luggage, her suitcase, and she started running. And when the Nilash saw that she's running, they were shooting after her and screaming after her. But she continued and ran until she found herself with nobody around. And then she stopped and she went, I don't know where she went. I have no idea. And I have no idea. She came back to the gate of the ghetto. And I think the only natural thing that I can think of was that she showed that certificate. And that's how she went inside the ghetto, that the priest gave her. That's fine. So she got inside the ghetto. But how did she take out 2 little children from the ghetto? She went in by herself. I have no idea how she did it. No idea. But she took us out, and the Russians were already on the gates of Budapest, and they were bombing every corner of Budapest. But they did it in they started in the north, then they went to the west. So what we did is, once they did the north side and all the people ran away from there and the house was completely empty, we went in the house and we slept there. That's what we did every night. Wherever they bombed during the day, we went there at night to sleep. But eventually we were very hungry. So my mother decided to leave me up in the very end of the attic because there was nobody there. And she took my sister and they were looking for food. And as they saw some food and they went in line, of course my mother took off the yellow star because she would have never made it with the yellow star. Because, the Nilash were walking and roaming around all the places. And my sister all of a sudden says to my mother in Hungarian, and everybody, of course, speaks Hungarian, "Mom, you forgot your yellow star." My mother was sure that the next one she gets it, she's going to be hit, and my sister is going to be hit, and they're going to die. So she squeezed my sister very hard, and she started to scream and cry because it hurt her. My mother hurt her. And so she made a big fuss and she started crying. So people were on the fuss and somehow didn't hear what she said. And so they took some food because we were very hungry. And she came up the steps. And as she comes up the steps, she was very near to me already. She started screaming at my sister, "Don't ever talk. Don't ever say anything." But she was screaming, and I never heard her scream. I always heard her talk nicely and calmly, and never in my life I got so scared. But I heard all those words she was telling my sister. And I, not my sister, I didn't speak for a year, one word. One word didn't come out of my mouth because I got so scared. And so the Russians came in, and of course the Germans went out. But life wasn't better when the Russians came in. It was better that people that did not get killed, but there was no food. And if the Russians found some, they sent it back to Russia. And they wanted change of communities right away. They put the Hungarians on the trolleys and they sent them to Russia. And the Russians came to Hungary, and it became a communist country in a minute. And that was that. And then, of course, all the Jews went to the Jewish center and put their names on the Jewish center and where they lived now. We came back to our apartment, but our apartment was too big, so the Russians cut it in two and put in 2 families, we and somebody else. But we did not want to be with somebody that we don't know. So my grandmother lived on the 2nd floor across from us, and she had a small apartment. So we went to live with her because we didn't want strangers to live with her. So we went to live with her. And my mother put our names there, and that we are still in the same place, but with my grandmother. And in the meantime, my father he was 9 months in Auschwitz. And he was sent on the march of the death from Auschwitz to Germany. And he came to Flossenburg, and it was amazing. It was a women's concentration camp. And he was there for 3 days, and then they marched from there to Pocking-Wollstadt, where the Luftwaffe was, where the air base was, the German air base. And all the people, not only the Jews, that came after such a march, they were 35 pounds. They didn't have much strength, but they also had their prisoners of war, like Hungarians and all kinds of Russians and all kinds of people. Those people had to close the holes and straighten it out so the Luftwaffe could go up on the air and fight the Americans. One day they saw my father collapsed and couldn't talk anymore. So they took him and they threw him on a pile of dead people. Luckily, with his face up, because he wasn't dead. He just couldn't talk anymore. I mean, he couldn't do anything anymore, and he couldn't talk even. And luckily, the American 65th Army came into the barracks with Eisenhower. And they looked at it, and they looked at those dead people, and they couldn't believe their eyes. All of a sudden, a soldier says, "This man I'm noticing that he blinks his eyes. Let's go and save him. Let's send him. He is still alive." They talked to him, but he couldn't open his mouth. He couldn't talk. And they took him to an army base to get him back to life. And then, of course, a Jewish soldier was there. His name was Sidney Schachmeister. Sidney Schachmeister looked after him when he went to the hospital and looked after him. I don't know if he was the one that recognized that he blinked with his eyes, but anyway, so they became very good friends. And of course, my father told him that I'm a rabbi. And so the Americans asked him if he could take care of all the people in the camp. So my father said he'll do that. And of course, he wasn't by himself. He had the UNRWA, not the UNRWA that is now. It was a different UNRWA. It was spelled differently. The JDC, they moved a little bit further down so they would have clean place. And lots of them went into the barracks of the airport, and lots of them went into the big homes and barracks. That's where they lived, but they got food for everybody, both food, and they tried to feed them, and especially the chocolate killed those people. They couldn't digest it. But slowly but surely, they got back to life. And this all happened in 1945, in May of 1945. And the minute my father heard that a young man is going back to Hungary to look for his wife and his children to see what happened to them, he gave my mother's address and asked him, because he didn't know that they all put their addresses up there, that please find them and see if my wife and my 2 children are alive. So that young man came back and he found his wife, but his 2 children died from starvation in the ghetto. And so then he looked, because he knew, I'm sure his wife told him that we all put our names up there, go look where they live. And he went up and he saw where my mother lives. So he came to my mother and he said, "Your husband is alive and he wants you to come with the children. Are your children alive?" "Yes." "So he wants you to come with the children to Pocking." And he gave her the address, which train to take and everything. And my mother said she was laughing. She thought that, from the sadness and from whatever he went through during the war, he's just a little crazy. But she said, just to make sure that he's alive or he's not alive, she took a little suitcase and she went to Germany to see him. And as she came, she saw him, and she said his face, and I'll show you the picture that they took at the time. His face was the same face, but of course his body wasn't the same. She said that they talked and talked and talked all night, and finally she got angry at him. She said, "Don't you ask, did you forget that you had 2 daughters? Don't you ask about them?" He said, "I was hoping that you would tell me, because I was afraid to ask." And so she told him they are fine and they're well and they're with their grandmother. And so he told her that he would like to rehabilitate the people that are here in the camp. And every day more and more people came in. And eventually this little camp became in the American zone, because there was also an English zone. In the American zone, that camp became the largest camp. It came from 300 people to 8,000 people. And it became the largest DP camp in Germany. When my mother and my sister and I, my sister Yehudit and I, came to Germany, not only my father came to greet us, but most of the camp came out to greet us, because it was such a unique thing for, in those times, for a whole family to get together. It gave them hope that maybe they'll find some remnants of their families. They were crying from happiness that they see a whole family unite, and that gave them a lot of courage and lots of hope.
This has been an absolutely amazing story, Miriam. I can't believe it's luck, right? All these stories, there's no explanation for why some people survived and some people didn't, and your family's bravery is just incredible. You are living in Israel now,
Yes.
in a time that is probably the closest event to what the Holocaust was like. Talk to me about how you're feeling and what you hope to see.
Yeah. I must tell you that, I went with a group of Americans who came to visit with a foreign office. I went to one of those places, but it was already 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later. But the smell still was there. Still nowadays, everything is just stays there as those horrible people left it. They ruined everything. They just for the sake of ruining and for the sake of cutting people apart, and the smell of the blood was there, and just horrible. But it's not a Holocaust. It's a pogrom. The Jews went through the pogroms in Russia, in Poland, in Hungary, everywhere. And they killed in such a horrible manner the Jews. But in here, maybe they killed them even in a worse manner. And, people that lived through it and said, we were next door neighbors almost. And we took them and we took their children to our hospitals. I took them in my car. I didn't charge them a penny. And I took them to the hospital and I made sure that everything is okay. And I took them home. And yet they came to my house and killed my children, killed my grandchildren. He didn't have any answers to that. I don't have an answer to it. But what happens over there is, you see, the difference. We as Jews, we were in Egypt, for 400 years we were slaves, and we came out of Egypt. We never went back to Egypt to retaliate. We remember it every Pesach, every Passover, we remember it, and we say there that every Amalek, we have to kill the Amalek, the real bad people, we have to kill them, but only if they do something bad to us. We are not initiating, never killing. And they just teach their children that the Jews are very bad, and because of the Jews, that's how they live, and they cannot live better, and we want to take back all Israel. And they never lived in Israel. They are not a part of Israel. They just came here, and we would have welcomed them, and we welcomed them, but to live like neighbors. but something else happened. So now we are warned, and we have to be very careful how we do it and what we do, and we have to really separate from them and be far away from them. The further, the better.
In light of what you saw throughout your life, what is a message that you have to young Jewish people that you want to share?
My message to young Jewish people is read your Bible. I don't care how you read it. If you read it as a history book, read it as a history book. If you want to learn from it, learn from it. But know your history. Because if you don't know your past, you don't have a present and you'll never have a good future. And that's the most important thing that we have to teach, not only in Israel, in our schools, but in the Jewish schools, in all over America, all over Europe, and all over the world. And that's my message to everybody. Just learn your history and be proud of it, because there's nothing like the Jewish Bible. And be proud that you are a Jew, and go with your yarmulke if you want to. Don't go with it. Go with it, a Star of David if you want to. Don't go with it, but be a proud Jew and never deny that you are Jewish, because you have the best history in the world and the oldest.
Thank you so much, Miriam, for this conversation. I am so grateful. Thank you so much. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please go ahead and rate us 5 stars. Be the first to hear our episodes by subscribing to People Jew Want to Know wherever you get your podcasts. And for exclusive content, follow us on Instagram at People Jew Want to Know.